I've been talking with some of the pro-life leadership from Ireland for a little while now, and when this kind of trip got put together not that long ago, I just started thinking about how can I help you specifically? I've been growing a real heart for the international pro-life movement, which really started a couple of years ago, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what I wanted to do is put together a talk just really for you and for your pro-life movement. So I'm recording it. We'll put it out for all the people that couldn't be here. But what I want to do is just give you some specific tips based on what I have learned. I know it's the American trying to learn stuff about Ireland. I know it's a different culture, but I've been talking to a lot of people, and I've learned some things. I want to give you, if I were in charge, and I'm not, but if I were in charge of the Irish pro-life movement, here are some of the things that I would be trying to pay attention to. So things that you should know or that you should do given what has happened now. Because I know right now a lot of you are sad. You just had your Roe versus Wade. We had it 45 years ago in America. You guys just had just a huge legal loss. But here's my encouragement for you, is our pro-life movement has been trying to deal with this for the last 45 years. And a lot of really, really good people doing the work, although I think our movement has made a lot of different mistakes. And what I'm hoping is that you can learn from our mistakes, and you can kind of fast forward through 45 years of experience and just start out awesome. Your movement is really, I know you guys have been talking about abortion for longer than a few years, but now there's this kind of new pro-life movement developing. That's why you guys are here this weekend. And what if you could just start out, you don't have to go through all of the same mistakes that we have had to learn from. And so I think that you should have a lot of hope. I don't think you're going to turn the Titanic around on a dime. But given the size of Ireland, I think your culture can change a lot faster than we can change things in America. You guys might make abortion illegal faster here than we can in America, even though our Roe versus Wade was 45 years ago. And if you learn from the best in the movement, in the international pro-life movement, figure out what is working, what is not, how do we do this the best way, I have so much hope for your community. I'm going to apologize right now because the first one is going to sound a bit self-serving, but there's a reason for it. So I went to Denmark a couple of years ago, and I learned something really interesting while I was there. So I get a call from Retten til Liv, Right to Life, and they had done something really cool. To their credit, the 3 oldest members of that group had gone to the 3 youngest members of the group and said, we're not very effective. To be fair, they're underground. There's not a big pro-life movement, and their culture is very, very against them. Their culture is we don't even talk about abortion anymore. That was 40 years ago. Now we're talking about Muslim immigration and climate change. Why are you even talking about this? Clearly, pro-choice is the right view, and very antagonistic. But they went to the 3 youngest people and said, pick your favorite pro-lifer in the world, and we'll fly him or her here and have them train us, and then maybe we can become more effective. And so they called me, and I went over there, and I was really excited to try to help them, but I learned something interesting while I was there. I learned that maybe America might be the least important place for me to do my work. Because we teach a certain dialogue style that is a softer, gentler approach than some of our colleagues, right, in the movement. And Retten til Liv has found that to be really, really important to them being effective. They are a lot more effective now. We've been keeping up with them. They're doing awesome. And I was impressed with them from the beginning, because the younger girl who's first Skyped me, Alnita, I ended this call. I'll never forget this thing that she said. She's this little hero. Because I said, I ended the call by saying something empathetic, so something along the lines of, I know things are way harder for you guys than it is for us in the States. I really hope I can help, blah, 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 something like that. And she says, oh, it's okay. They don't even know we exist. They won't see us coming. She is so hopeful, so optimistic. We're underground. They don't even know about us. You're going to help make us awesome, and then we're going to go out and we're going to be awesome. And they did. They have. They're awesome. They're doing awesome now. And so a couple things happened on the trip. One, I grew a real love for the international pro-life community. It's here are my brothers and sisters in Denmark. I got to train the pro-life movement in Denmark, all 60 of them, And I was like, here are these awesome people. I didn't even know they existed. And now I do, and I love them. Secondly, and more importantly, I think I learned this approach that we've been teaching at ERI is even more important in a country like this, where the culture is way against you, than it is in America, where it's not easy. It's not an easy conversation to have, but like pro-lifers will sometimes be, I know it's gonna be a shock to you, weird and obnoxious. And sometimes it'll happen, and the pro-choice person, because in America, this is still considered like an important political issue, sometimes the pro-lifer will still be given a little bit of a pass. Like they can make a mistake, and it's not the worst thing. In Denmark, you don't get a second chance. You make one mistake, you state one false statistic, or something like that, and it's over. And so this is where it's like, this is a really important thing for people to learn how to do. And I think that's true in your culture too. So now I'm a lot more interested in going around the country, trying to help people who are dealing with even a harder culture than I am dealing with, and learn there's a fresh approach. There's a different way to do things. So as self-serving as it sounds, my first tip is to master the dialogue tips and arguments in our Equip for Life course, because we are teaching a different way, and I think it's going to help your movement a lot. I was chatting with some of the leaders at dinner last night. The equal rights argument was not being used a couple of years ago. I don't know if that would have been enough to change everything, to change the result. But given how radically more persuasive we have found that argument to be in literally thousands of tests in the States, I imagine it would have been really helpful here. And so it's like, this is another reason for hope. This is why when people ask me, am I hopeful or pessimistic? Like, I'm generally a pessimist, like as far as like my life goes. But with the pro-life movement, I'm an optimist, because it's not like we've been doing everything perfectly for 45 years. It's like we've been doing a lot wrong. And part of that, we haven't been using the equal rights argument. So it's like, imagine what the future could look like. What if the pro-life movement got really effective? What if we were using the best arguments and using like good dialogue styles that helps people to be less defensive when they talk to us, and our messaging was better. Like, I don't know what that future could look like, but I want to help make it possible, right? I want to see what could happen. There's a reason for hope. Anytime something has not been done as well as it could have been done in the past, that's a reason for hope. If our movement was perfect and had been perfect for 45 years, I would not have hope. I would not have reason for hope, right? But it's like, oh no, we could get a lot better. So I think you should learn from what we're doing. We've got an online course. I'll talk to you about it at the end. Okay, this is going to sound less self-serving now, and it'll be more comfortable for me. Emphasize secular versus religious arguments. Generally, it's not just Ireland, but I know that you've experienced a growing attitude that is very antagonistic toward the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church priest scandal has rocked the church really hard, and people are becoming very, very anti-Catholic sometimes. I believe that was one of the important things going on that resulted in the referendum in 2018. This was some people, I think, in your culture were, figuratively giving the middle finger to the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is seen as a pro-life thing. And while there are a lot of people, this happens in the States too, where they will check the box on the census or the survey or whatever, it says I'm Catholic, but not very many of them go to Mass. They're culturally Catholic. They were raised Catholic. They go to Mass on Christmas and Easter, but then on the other weeks they're not going. Like, if you might have 60-70% people say they're Catholic, and only 10 or 15% actually be going to church and taking it really seriously. And so then the scandal comes out, and people are rejecting kind of the authoritarian kind of nature of how they perceive the Catholic Church. And it's like, screw the church. And I think, so for you, here's what that means, is it is extra important. I think it's important anyway, but I think it's extra important for you to know how to make your pro-life arguments without referencing religion. You're not going to be only talking to pro-choice Christians. You might talk to some. And I've got different arguments that I use with pro-choice Christians, at least sometimes. I should say, there are certain arguments I never make with atheists, but I'm willing to make with a pro-choice Christian, because it might resonate with them. But I know that these arguments wouldn't resonate with atheists. I'm going to tell you about one of them tomorrow morning, in tomorrow morning's more philosophical session. But I won't go into detail right now. Assume that everyone you talk to is agnostic or atheist, and talk with them in a way that's going to make sense on their level. If they believe that the pro-life movement is inherently religious, that it only makes sense to be pro-life. If you're religious, you won't win. Unless like the whole country has like this religious turnaround and you know, a revival or something like that. Okay, but assuming that doesn't happen, then people need to understand the secular pro-life is a huge organization. There's a lot of people, well, I should say it differently. There's only a few people running it, but there's a lot of people in the States that are like, this is me. I am pro-life and I'm agnostic or atheist. And people need to understand that is possible. Sometimes the way that the deepest questions are answered will vary. Like their answers on deep questions might be different than some of mine as a Christian, but that's okay. We can still work together. People, like this needs to be a movement, generally speaking, a very diverse movement. It shouldn't just be old white Catholic men, or else you lose. We need to be interesting, young, diverse, all races. We need to have straight people and gay people. We need to have Christians and Muslims and atheists and all kinds of people working together saying, look, it's wrong to kill people. That's what we're trying to help our society understand. This is a human rights issue. It's an equal rights issue. And you don't have to be white or Catholic or straight or whatever to understand that. So emphasize secular versus religious arguments. Number 3, know the ins and outs, and I hope I get the pronunciation right. We're going to do a test. I'm going to find out if I can do this right. Know the ins and outs about Savita Navarro's death. Did I get it? Oh, yeah! Dumb American can pronounce the name. Good. Okay, so you need to understand. And I know this is not news. I know you know about Savita. This is 2013. I get that. The problem is there was so much fake news about Savita's death. Pro-choice people you talk to don't understand what happened. They've bought into the lie that is your pro-life law that killed Savita. It didn't. Her medical team screwed up. Her death was preventable. We were talking about like the Georgia and Alabama heartbeat bills recently, and none of them passed. Like all of them got blocked because they violate Roe versus Wade, and you can't just pass a state amendment that just says, well, we think differently than the Supreme Court. That's not how it works. But even as strict as the law was written in Alabama, Savita Navarro could have gotten an abortion in Alabama or Georgia, even if those laws were upheld. Her medical team screwed up. And so what I'm going to read to you is just 2 paragraphs from a resource we created last year called Refuting Pro-Choice Memes, Responding to Snark with a Winning Argument. We created, I think it's like a 4,000 word resource. It's free. If you go to equalrightsinstitute.com/memes, you'll find it. And what we did, when pro-choice memes really exploded around the heartbeat laws and around Brett Kavanaugh ending up on the Supreme Court, was people freaked out about. There were a lot of pro-choice memes, and a lot of them were frankly deceptive. And my feeling was like, look, I don't think you tend to change a lot of minds in a long Facebook comment thread. You might find future pro-choice friends in that comment thread that you can message one-on-one and get into a one-on-one conversation where people feel safer and more able to change their mind. But we should at least be willing to refute false statements. And so we did, I think we've got like, 9, 10, 11 categories on this resource, where what we did was we gave not just examples of the memes, but we gave, here's a template response to them. Like you could literally just copy and paste our answers. I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think the best way to do it is to kind of start with that and make it your own. But a lot of people just don't want to start with a blank piece of paper, figuratively. And so we're just like, here's like a version that we think is good, and feel free to kind of work with that. So I'm going to read you kind of, this is the way, like I know you know about Savita's death. Here's the way that we're encouraging people to talk about it. And you might just kind of glean a couple things from it. I wanted to let you know that pro-life people don't want to see women die. I think it is a tragedy that Savita died. I've read about her story, and it looks like the physicians treating her made mistakes which led to her death. It is so tragic when someone dies, and it could have been prevented. The doctors missed the diagnosis of sepsis, which they could have treated earlier with better results. They were also incorrect to deny her an abortion. Ireland, like all of the U.S. states, had a life of the mother exception. It's unclear whether aborting the child to shorten the miscarriage would have saved her life, given the misdiagnosis, but it was legally on the table, and the doctors were wrong to say it wasn't. It wasn't Ireland's abortion laws that led to Savita's death. It was physician incompetence. Even in Alabama, the state with the most stringent abortion laws, Savita would have been granted an abortion. Pro-life people believe that all humans, including fetal humans, are equal in worth and dignity. We want to pursue laws that protect women without killing other humans. You may disagree about whether all humans are people, but I hope you can see why I think the way I do about abortion. There was a hospital, a Catholic hospital, I want to say in Arizona several years ago, where something similar to Savita happened. And so I've had this idea. I don't know if I'm ever going to pursue it, but it's the kind of thing that someone in here might want to take and run with it, and I'm happy for you to do so. If a woman dies during, a pregnant woman dies, and you have a pro-life law, it's going to get blamed on you. And so in Arizona, my understanding of what happened with the Catholic hospital is the Catholic hospital did not have good training in bioethics, did not have good training in understanding things like double effect reasoning, and trying to figure out in what cases is it morally justifiable to intentionally end the pregnancy to save the woman's life. Some pro-lifers want to call that something other than an abortion. I don't really care what you call it. I just care about whether it's justified or not. As someone who believes in self-defense, I think if you're a woman and you have a life-threatening pregnancy and there's no way to save both, I believe that it's okay to intervene and save her life. And I could do a whole talk on that. I don't have time right now. But you can justify it with double effect reasoning, which is what Catholics usually use, or I think you can use a kind of a self-defense argument, which I prefer. But that's my view. Whether it's an ectopic pregnancy or a child who's older, the math is still the same. Obviously, if we can save both, we should save both. But if we can't, then we save the one that we can. And I believe the Catholic hospital in Arizona that I'm thinking of, was like the people on the team were just confused. They should have said, yes, we can intervene, but they didn't. I think the pro-life movement ought to train these hospitals. The people in the make sure they understand what those lines are. Because when someone dies, obviously that's a tragedy in and of itself. But it's also going to hurt our movement. It's going to make it harder for us to be able to make abortion against the law because people are going to be freaking out about what about life-threatening pregnancies? What if we could say, people do not have to die from life-threatening pregnancies? That is not what the pro-life movement's view is. It's a few extremists in the pro-life movement who think that, if you have, it sucks for you if you have a life-threatening pregnancy. We never, you can never, ever, ever kill anyone no matter what the circumstances, even self-defense. And so, but that's almost no people. And so to say look, even the United States Council of Catholic Bishops agrees that you can have a self-injectomy to help with an ectopic pregnancy, to save her life. And so this is not the pro-life movement is basically on the same page on this. There's debate about which procedures are more morally justified than others. That's deeper than I need to go right now. Just you need to help your community understand, yes, we want to make abortion illegal, but we don't want anyone to die. We don't think anyone needs to die. Savita didn't need to die, even given the abortion laws that were there at the time. You need to understand the timeline of what happened there, and you have to be able to explain it because it's going to come up in your conversations. Just like guys, every conversation you have, someone's going to say, well, why should you even have a view about this? You're a man. So you need to know how to respond to that, and we've got the best response to that. It's in the course. But you also are going to, I think probably about every conversation you have, someone's going to bring up Savita. So you need to understand it so well that you can explain to someone who's open-minded why Savita didn't have to die, why her medical team screwed up. Okay, tip number 4. Learn how to speak persuasively about freedom of conscience. I just think this is going to be really important for you. I think this is going to be one of the areas that your movement is focusing on legally. So I've got a couple of tips for that. One talking point that we would be using at ERI for that is if you believe in individual freedom, which basically everybody does, why would you take that away from doctors? Why would you take individual freedom away from doctors? Also, if autonomy is the cornerstone of medical ethics, why is it acceptable to deprive physicians of autonomy? That doesn't make sense. As Rachel and I, Rachel Crawford on our team, we're kind of brainstorming about this. We were thinking about a comparison to slavery. If you offer to pay someone for a service and they refuse, but the law then forces them to do it anyway, that's forced labor. And that is what the pro-choice community in Ireland is trying to make happen. They're trying to say, it doesn't matter whether you want to do the service, you have to do the service. You're legally bound to do the service. That's forced labor. I'd be making slavery comparisons. For example, forcing your Jewish house painter to paint a huge swastika on your house, or forcing an actress to shoot a nude scene who didn't agree to. This is examples of forced labor. No one should be forced to do those kinds of things. You should be able to find the painter who's willing to do it, or find the actress who's willing to do that. And so I think talking about it in those terms would be really effective. Number 6, I think the Irish pro-life movement needs to make abortion their #1 voting priority. So Ben wrote a great piece in Minimize a couple years ago about a study in 2016 that showed that only 2% of Irish people considered abortion to be the most important way, reason based on how they vote, their voting priority. 2%. I'll tell you this. Any politician who knows that statistic has no reason to take you seriously unless he or she is already passionately pro-life. I know you have some pro-life politicians, like 7 of them or something like that. I know there's a few, and they're probably passionately pro-life. They are not with you for pragmatic reasons. There are no pragmatic reasons to be a pro-life politician right now because you don't have a voting bloc. Whereas in America, we do. We have a lot of people who vote only based on abortion, or some other people who they vote on multiple issues, but abortion's like the most important one. And there are pros and cons about being a single issue voter, okay? There are certain kinds of people who can become president. But you guys have the opposite problem, where you're not giving politicians an incentive for working with you at all. So, I was talking to Eilis about this last night. It's like, I'm not saying you guys should start surveying candidates and releasing the results of the surveys right now. The politicians don't have a reason to do the survey, and they're not going to work with you right now. I think what your entire movement needs to be working on, one of your biggest priorities, should be convincing other people that this should be the #1 voting thing. You guys have such a better voting system than we do in the States. In the States, we have literally the worst of all the options. There's a lot of different ways to do voting, right? We have first past the post. You only get to vote for one person. It's crazy. That might sound crazy to you. It is. It's the worst way to do it. Whereas you guys get to rank. That's I really hope America goes to do that. Maine just voted to make that possible. So that gives me hope. Maybe we could actually make it happen. And if you haven't learned about different voting systems, CGP Gray is this awesome educational YouTube guy, and he has done multiple awesome videos about voting systems. But you guys, CGP Gray, it's just his initials. If you look up voting systems, CGP Gray, you'll find several. They're great. They're animal analogies and stuff like that. Anyway, if that's not going to make any sense, actually, what's in my head, but whatever. They're fantastic. I've watched them multiple times with people just to get a discussion going. Point is, you have a ranked system. So it's not like you're throwing away your vote just because you vote for the pro-life person first, who maybe doesn't really have a very good chance. Vote for that person first, and then vote for other maybe more viable candidates on your second and third options. But if you convince 10, 15% of your population to say this is our '1 voting issue because this is a life and death issue. People are literally being discriminated against and slaughtered. So we are voting #1 on this because none of our other rights even make sense if you don't have the right to life. So we're voting #1 on this. Then politicians have to take you seriously. Then you can survey them and say, we want to know what guarantees you have. Will you vote with us on freedom of conscience? Will you vote with us on a late-term abortion ban? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they have to take a survey for you to say, hey, these politicians say that they will work with the pro-life movement. And then if they break the promise, then you expose them and say, hey, here's the survey. This person said he was going to work with us, and he just betrayed us. We are getting him out of office, at the next election. You've got to make them fear you, or else they're not going to work with you. And so I think that needs to be a big priority of your movement, which seems like you have to have a lot of conversations with a lot of people about why abortion should be the first thing that they're voting on. How would you, I know slavery was never legal in Ireland, but what if it was? What if slavery was happening, but people were slavery's bad. I'm personally anti-slavery, but I really vote first on the economy. I want to make sure that I'm taken well care of, that the best financial situation is happening for me. That's lame. It's no, slavery is way worse. It's way more important. And so we vote first on trying to abolish slavery, and then of course consider the other things. I'm not saying be a single issue voter. There are a lot of important issues. I just don't think all the issues are equally important. Some things are more important than others. And so rank them accordingly. At least you have the voting system where you can. And then tip number 7, create momentum with small legal victories. I don't think you are going to completely abolish abortion next year. It's at least not likely based on current trends. But I think you can start with small victories. I think things like freedom of conscience. I've been talking with the college groups. I know there's a big censorship problem on university campuses, and a lot of people who have an attitude that is pro-censorship. I would be fighting that full frontal assault against censorship and talking about how censorship is cowardly. Censorship is for people who are too afraid of others hearing your views. What, you're afraid of the words coming out of my mouth? Like, come on. So I would be trying to get your culture to be more anti-censorship, which makes it more protected that you'll be able to say your views and convince people of them. And probably focusing on something like a late-term abortion ban that draws it back. Here's where it's legal now. Let's say it's up to viability for these reasons. Let's try to draw that back. Perhaps based on the recent fetal pain thing. Did you guys talk about the new, like the brand new, like the doctor who changed his mind? Okay, cool. Like,
I had a doctor speak on that last night.
Good. So you should be talking about that. Do you know how rare it is for someone to change their mind about a published work? That doesn't happen. And this poor guy, I don't know what his life is like right now, but I don't think he'll be consulting with Planned Parenthood anymore because of what he has just done. But that is huge, what just happened. So master the dialogue, tips, and arguments in the Equip for Life course. Emphasize secular versus religious arguments. Know the ins and outs about Savita help and Alvaro's death. Learn how to speak persuasively about freedom of conscience. IRIS pro-life movement needs to make abortion number one voting priority and create momentum with small legal victories.